guys, welcome to Bar Z. My name's Stan, and as usual, before we get started in the video, today's picks for Amazon affiliates is Cool Mist number 77, which is the mist cooler that I use, and Noga Mini Cool. Links below to Amazon to pick up either one of those, but I'm going to put links into stuff I use in these videos. Alright, so last you saw, we were getting started on the 5-block test, and we did our very first test, and I think we were either 4 or 6 tenths off front to back, and we were within a tenth side to side. So let's see how we do when we try to dial in that mag a little more and get the grinder really ready to use. Let's get into it. Okay, in our last episode you saw we were doing a 5-block test, and I've been doing some extra work on it. I've done some I think I was within 4 tenths before, front to back, and about 1/10 side to side. So I was encouraged, but I think there was still a little more work to be done, and I believed it all to be in the grinding of the mag. So I spent another couple hours, changed the wheels. I switched over to a little coarser wheel. I went from a 60 grit down to a 46 grit, and it was the trouble I was having is the wheel was loading up halfway across the mag with that finer wheel. So I switched to a coarser wheel and did a real fine dress on it. And now we're going to see what the results of the 5-block test were. Now these are numbered. I have you probably can't see them. You might be able to. But we've got numbers scratched in there. And this is the same orientation I put them down on the plate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this represents the back left of the chuck, and I've already kind of dialed this in and checked the results, so I know the results, but you don't. Okay, so the number 1 is kind of my master. That's what I set everything by. So I set everything to 0 there, and pardon my arm, I'm going to try to keep it under the camera. Okay, so side to side, we're within a tenth. Go to the center of the plate. This is dead center. Again, a tenth low. Let's go to the front left of the plate. And there I'm pretty spot on. And here's the front right of the plate. And I'm within a tenth. So at this point, I'm happy with the top of the mag. Now, what the other things we've done is all I did was tram it in. When I set it down into when we seated the mag, I set it down into a wet epoxy paint. I sprayed the table, sprayed the bottom of the chuck on both were freshly ground. I seated the chuck, and I trammed it in while the paint was still wet. And then I set my clamp bolts, not too tight. At that point, I was ready to grind the top, and then I've spent quite a bit of time getting the top where I'm happy with it, where I'm within a tenth side to side and front to back. So I'm pretty good with the top of the chuck. Now it's time to dress the rear face and the front face of the chuck. Let's go over to the surface grinder, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. Okay, as you can see, I'm doing multiple passes at the same setting. I'm not doing any in-feeds. I'm just letting it spark out. And my sparks are really getting less and less. It's gone back and forth, maybe 20 times. I'm flooding it hard with coolant to keep the rub down and hopefully to blast out any stuff that gets caught up in the CBN. I am blasting directly on the CBN in hopes of dislodging anything that gets in there. That is a CBN wheel with a 1-degree relief per side, so it's actually made for side wheeling. It's a very thin wheel. So I am concerned about deflection. That's why you see that large washer on the unit. But the sparks are almost nil right now, so we're coming up on the end, I do believe. I just want to let the hydraulic do the work. I don't want to do this with the rack and pinion, because that can influence the table with the hand crank. The hand crank's just kind of there for setup and layout. Okay, so I brought you around to the front of the table. I got a Noga arm hanging directly below the center line of the wheel. That is a CBN wheel, which is a boron nitrate wheel, and it's got a 1 degree back relief on each side, so it's made for side wheeling. That's what I had that wheel built for. I use Continental Diamond Tool in case any of you guys are interested. Good guys over there. They'll build you anything you want. So we're just going to run across here. I started off a 1/10 below, so, or above, I'm sorry. And right there I'm to my last bolt hole for my my rear fence. The bolt holes are about 1 inch in from the ends. So pretty happy with that, you know. All right, next up we're going to do this front edge right here. We need to do the same thing and get it parallel, and I'll show you why. I'll show you what I use. A little piece of Delrin with a step in it. There's a step you can see. And what I do is, if this is running true to the axis of the machine, and say you're doing some flat work, you just want to plop it down, but you still want to get it square, but you don't necessarily want to run it up against a fence. This is kind of a temporary fence. You hook it on the front edge of the machine, as so. Put your part in, parallel your part, mag it down, pull your plastic. Plastic doesn't stick to the magnet, so all that matters is that this edge and this edge are parallel. You can build one of those in your milling machine pretty easy. It's just a scrap of Delrin. Okay, I'm going handheld here to try to get you in to see some of the things that were wrong with this chuck when I got it. It was the top was badly scarred, had a lot of gouges and stuff, and the front's still not absolutely perfect. But everywhere else it came out to a sharp edge. There's another booger there. I'm not going to chase any of these. I'm just going to, you know, leave them. So if I chase that, that's probably another 20 or 30 thousandths off of the front and top. But she's running nice and straight now. So I'm happy with the way the front runs. This absolute front out here was just beat to hell. There's little pock marks and everything in it. So I wanted to get that front edge cleaned up and make it a good reference surface to the axis of the machine. So this chuck, top's good, back's good, front's good. All I got left to do is bolt on the fence. As I showed you before, it just bolts onto some threaded holes here in the back and true that up, which is super easy to do. That's a kind of a maintenance thing that you do anyways. I don't, you know, every time you pull the fence off and bolt it back on, I don't care what you do, it's always out. You always got to just touch it. So, and you don't pull off much, a few tenths, just dust it. All right. So we're pretty happy with our new chuck, pretty happy with our new Turkited machine. Let's see if it holds up. You know, that was my first experience with Turkite, and it was a pretty interesting experience. You know, I had a pretty good time doing it. And again, the wheel's off right now, but just to make room for an indicator. But the wheel I got, that's from Continental Diamond Tool, and this is a CBN with a 1 degree relief on each side. It's a very thin wheel. It's only 70 thousandths thick. But that little bit of diamond is proud, sits proud of the actual center here, the steel part. So it sits proud of that, and it's got a 1 degree half hourglass, if that makes sense. But These guys are pretty awesome to work with. That's that Continental Diamond tool. Now they'll build you anything you want, and that's what I've been using them for super abrasives. But that is a CBN 60, I think. 120, I'm sorry. CBN 120 is that abrasive, and you can feel it. It's still really sharp. I just plowed a bunch of my fingernail off there. Okay, now we're up to the back fence, and you know, I've got the front and the back of the chuck square, parallel with the axes, where I'm happy. Now this is the one that needs to get bolted on and dressed. I chased all the holes with a tap, cleaned out the holes, blew them out with compressed air, the anti-seize on the bolts, and I always lift my fence just slightly. I just stuck an Allen wrench under there. The fence is on slotted holes, so you can move it up and down, but if you elevate it, one thing it does is it allows you to get debris out. You'll have coolant and all kinds of debris on the chuck, and it'll get packed in if you're down too tight with a fence. So every bolt hole has a little standoff cast into it, and this just gives me a place to go in there with compressed air or whatever, blow it out, clean it out. So that elevates the fence slightly. And like I say, I just used an Allen wrench to equally space it. And what also that does is I use these little magnetic parallels. They're not magnetic, they're magnetic transfers. And if you don't know what a magnetic transfer is, slap it down, turn on your mag, and then you stick down whatever to the top of it, and she's stuck. Now there's rules. I'll give you, this is kind of a side note. Let's turn it 90 degrees. We're going to put the poles opposite, because the poles in the magnetic chuck are going this way, and the poles in the transfer block are going the other way. All right, mag down, nothing. But this is down. Interesting, right? It won't transfer the magnetism if you're adjacent to. You have to be parallel with, and that's solid. All right. Anyways, these are the magnetic transfers I use, and I want them to go up against the fence. I don't want them to go under the fence. I want them to index into the fence, and I want a little bit of fence left for my parts to go in and bump into that. So that's why I keep that gap in between the fence and the chuck. All right, so our fence is attached. We're ready to grind. Okay, well, after trying that CBN wheel, I only got it within about a thou. And you know, that was okay when I did the front and the back here, but that fence I wanted dead on. So I switched it over to a pink wheel. This is a very thin pink wheel, and I got it shaped in the back with a 1 degree relief. So let's get dressing this right after I answer my annoying phone. Okay, after I got done with the CBN wheel, wasn't completely happy with it. I had about a 8 or 9/10 variation across the back, and I attribute that to that thin wheel flexing. And even though I let it spark out, it just wasn't going to go away. So I switched over to a rigid wheel. This is 60 grit J hardness with a 1 degree back relief on it on the back side, and I got it set up just for doing side wheeling. So hopefully the rigid wheel will give me a nice straight fence, because I sure wasn't getting it with the CBN. And what I was doing with the CBN out front and out back on the chuck, I needed that extra depth and that extra thinness to get down, actually to reach in there. You know, I was at the extremes of the machine. This is only a 6-inch machine and a 6-inch chuck, and my travel is about 6.5. So the only way I was going to get there was with that thin wheel. I wasn't going to do it with a wheel with any depth. Anyways, enough talking. Let's get I'll get some coolant set up on this, and then we can see if we can straighten this thing out. But CBN was a no-go. Okay, and without moving my wheel position, I was able to get an indicator in there, which is actually kind of tricky. But I'm just going to move the tables very slowly by hand. But I got that fence just where I want it now. There's still coolant and junk on there. And there she dropped about 1/10. But I'm happy with that. And any subsequent dressings, it's just going to get better and better. But that's a full travel of the table there. So I'm pretty happy. This this whole setup's ready to go back into service. Okay guys, well that's the end of this project. This mag's ready to go into service. I'm happy with the back fence. I mean, everything we did after we worked on the table, Phil and I doing the Turkite, pretty much screwed anything I did with the chuck or the table or the fences. You know, that's a total game changer. So you got everything you did from there up, you got to redo it. Regrind the table, regrind the bottom of the mag, reseat the chuck, tram the chuck, dress the top, dress the front, dress the back, drop in the fence, dress the fence. So there's a lot to do. It's not just slap it together and let it fly. So this is kind of part two to that Turkite redo, and me getting this thing where I trust it, and I'm ready to do flat work again, large flat work. The 618 is big enough to do, I used to do a Kurt 6-inch vices and match them. If someone brought me a pair of Kurts that were off a little bit, I could regrind one and match it to the other one. Or, you know, any big flat work. This machine's wonderful. So I'm ready to do flat work again, and I've been turning away jobs. So super happy to get this done. Thanks to Phil, and hope you guys enjoyed reseating the mag chuck and get it all dialed in. There's a lot to it, and it took a good 6 to 8 hours to get the chuck where I'm happy with it, where I can make parts. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.